Hello and welcome back to the RamsTalkPodcast preview show. We're here today ahead of our clash with Wycombe Wanderers, hoping they don't do what they did to us last season after our good run. And joining me today is a friend of the pod, really good guy, matchday commentator at Wycombe Wanderers. It's Phil Catchpole. How are you, Phil?
I'm very well, Jake. Yeah, looking forward to the trip to Pride Park, and hopefully we can do what we did last season at our place. But we shall see. I'm sure we'll discuss the what ins and outs of why or why not that might happen. We'll see. But yeah,
Well,
pretty
exactly.
good outside of the football.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good to hear. Outside of the football, yeah. I mean, we've got to talk about the games last season first off. Two really weird games. I mean, the first game, we ended up winning it really late on. The second game, I think you were 3-0 up at one point or 3-1 up, and we pulled it back to 3-2 and nearly got a result, which ended up ending our unbeaten run. And we don't like to talk about what happened after that. But when you think back to those games, what did you make of them?
Yeah, well, the one at Pride Park was like an incredibly fiery atmosphere because of all the things that had happened off the pitch sort of previously to that, added a bit of spice to it as well. And I think Derby fans were clearly sort of really up for that game as well. But also it was great to see Pride Park bouncing full, fans getting excited about the football again. And it was a game where the players really rose to the occasion for the home fans. I think Wycombe went 1-0 up that day, or certainly at 1-1. I think Anis Vermette scored, and yeah, you could really feel it. You know, as a commentator, I don't sit in the away end, so I'm sort of surrounded by home fans, and it was certainly one of the more vociferous areas that I've sat and commentated in. And certainly some of the fans near us, their feelings known sort of during and during the game and at full time. Do you know what? You know, and I love it. You know, as football fans showing passion is all good. So bring it on. It was. You know, a great stadium to work in. I've worked in it before during the pandemic. So to see it with fans was fantastic. And to see the fans sort of impact the game like you guys did was fantastic to see. And then the flip side at Adams Park, I thought we did a classic sort of Wycombe on you guys, you know, and it was a lot of big teams. You're not the first team to come there and get unstuck. Yeah, it was really good to see that day as well. And a fantastic game. And to bring a run to an end, it often happens. It often can happen with teams like Wycombe as well. And we're really, really, really hoping we can do it again on Saturday, because we could do with a win, and you guys want a good run.
No, I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong. But I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about when we talk about your game plan, I had to listen back to our preview earlier, and I listened back to our pod after the game as well. And we were just talking about how you guys basically, you turned up, you had a game plan, and you told every other team in the league how to beat Derby County. You know, that physicality, that directness. And I mean, I think the 3-2 scoreline flattered us a little bit. I think you were much better than us on the day, which, you know, you don't often say that with this Derby team, unless you're on about the start of the season. So it was a really interesting game. And one of the things that happened straight after that, or near enough straight after that, was a change in manager. Now, Gareth Ainsworth obviously had a quite unsuccessful stint in the Championship, and you brought in Matt Bloomfield. Now, I've been looking at his stats. They don't look too promising. 1.2 points per game at Colchester, 1.3 points per game at Wycombe. What have you made to him since he's come in?
Matt's got his own identity. He's a club legend, first and foremost. You know, 19 years as a player and a coach at Wycombe Wanderers before getting his first managerial job at Colchester. Our chairman wanted him to leave to go and get that managerial experience somewhere else. And then it was just 4.5 months later, he's back at Wycombe. I think the Colchester stats are a bit of an anomaly because they were absolutely terrible when he joined. They were awful, absolutely dreadful at the bottom of League Two. He kind of stopped the rot, and then he got manager of the month in January, and then in February he joined us. They backed him in the window there, but he did a good job. They stayed up. I think he contributed to that largely, even though he left in February. So I think if you look at the PPG for that spell at Colchester, you have to do it on the backdrop that they were absolutely abysmal when he joined. And then he came to Wycombe. You know, Gareth left after that Derby game, and we'd just won 6 in a row, I think it was. Sam Vokes got injured. A few other players got injured as well, key players in there. And also, it's a bit like the Fergie Wenger scenario. who are at clubs for such a long time, they build a dynasty. And often when the next person comes in, it's a huge challenge. I think with Matt Bloomfield, a lot of that challenge was overcome by the fact that the fans absolutely love him. He's called Mr. Wycombe because he's been around the place for so long. But he really wanted to make sure that he was being his own person, his own manager, his own methods. And I think that's what we've seen. We've seen a transition. And you guys will know better than anyone else. These take time, transitions in football. You don't rebuild a playing style, a philosophy, a playing staff, a management staff overnight. It takes time. And we're in that transitional period at the moment.
Yeah, well, we certainly know a little bit about that. And I think Derby are finally starting to come out of that a little bit. So give it 6 more months, and I'm sure you guys will be right up there. But I mean, just looking at the season so far, we spoke a little bit before we started recording about the inconsistencies. You had a great September. I don't think you've won a league game since October the 7th, which is ridiculous. A 4-1 win against Fleetwood. I mean, there's a lot of draws there. You've lost 4 games in a row. Is that representative of the way you played?
Certainly not at the start of the run. It's 8 games now in the league without a win. They include draws at Peterborough, Oxford United, when before Liam Manning left. Peterborough, I think, have kicked on as well since that 2-2 draw. We lost 1-0 at Barnsley, which I'm sure everyone in the world has seen the winning goal from that night. That looked to be a 0-0 draw all over until something crazy happened at the end. We lost 4-2 to Bolton in a game where we perhaps gifted them at least 2 goals in that game, and they've been on really good form as well. But as we all know, it's a results business. We can all look at great performances against these teams, but essentially we've not won them. And I think of late, losing to Morecambe in the FA Cup at home, losing to Reading, who hadn't had an away win in a year, and then losing to Shrewsbury at home on Saturday. And they've only scored 2 goals away from home before coming into that game on Saturday as well. Means that there is an element of frustration coming through the fans now in terms of the results. But like I touched on earlier on, there's been a completely different approach now to how Wycombe Wanderers play football. It's 3 at the back. They play out from the back. The keepers take the short goal kicks, etc. Something that absolutely never happened under Gareth Ainsworth. And there's no right or wrong way to play football, obviously, but we are playing a very, very different style. We had a huge turnover of players as well in the summer. We didn't sign loanees for about 2 or 3 years. This year that's changed. We have Freddie Potts on loan from West Ham United. He's been fantastic. He got injured in the FA Cup first round, and since then you can almost see when the performances maybe started to suffer a bit. I think he was quite integral to how he played. Sam Vokes has been injured. We've had lots of injuries at the back with Jack Grimmer, Joe Jacobson. Chris Farino's had spells out as well. We've had injuries all over the park, but I'm sure every team in League One will be able to say the same thing. That's why it's a squad game. I think just the amount of transition, though, in terms of playing staff and style and the injuries have equal to us having an inconsistent season. Slow start, great September, October, performances were good. November, it's not been good enough. And now we're looking at a busy Christmas schedule, looking to get a result on the board to hopefully kickstart a happy Christmas.
Well, yeah. I'm just looking at you. Yeah. I mean, what can I say about that? But I'm just looking at your last game. It's a 1-0 defeat to Shrewsbury. Now Shrewsbury beat us as well. So yeah, we know the pain. How did that go? Was that along the same lines, or?
I think some of our fans, looking at the forums and stuff before recording this, quite frustrated with our manager's approach to the interview afterwards, because he was saying that the performance was there, and in large patches it was, in terms of XG and pass completion in the opposition half, etc. That obviously it's a stats-driven game now, especially from an analytical point of view, and managers are having to pay more attention to that now and integrate it into what they do. And Matt Bloomfield is no different to that. But obviously, a lot of the fans they just look at the one stat that's important to them, which is the score. So those Shrewsbury fans who left Adams Park on Saturday probably don't know what the XG was for that game, and nor do they care, because they won the game. And it was a classic away performance from them. They had 1 shot on target. It was from outside the area. It was an absolutely fantastic shot, and it won the game. In terms of the goal scoring, But where they really won it was once they got in the lead, they defended like Lionhearts. Aaron Pierre, former player of Wycombe Wanderers, and Shay Dunkley at the back, and then Joe Anderson as well. I thought played really, really well. They frustrated us. They did what Wycombe have done to many, many teams down the years, which makes it slightly more painful as well when you see it being done to yourself after so many times. But you have to salute them for an excellent away performance. But to be brutally honest, Wycombe have to be better in the final third, especially at home against a team like that. The teams who want to be up in that top half of the table, they know they have to play around that and find their way through. I know you guys struggled with parts of that in the last 12 months and have worked it out. And, perhaps teams will watch you and then work out how you've done it and stop you. And then the process starts again. But Wycombe certainly need to improve what's going on in the final third. The possession and the passing is a lot easier on the eye than it was under the previous manager. But we need to marry these up now with results. And Matt Bloomfield is aware of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between the Wycombe of now and the Derby of a couple of months ago. Even though on paper we were scoring goals, there were a lot of games where, exactly as you said, teams would nick a goal, sit in, and there was nothing we could do about it. We couldn't work it out. Our solution since then is just Mendes-Lang's really good. And that's pretty much it. And that gets us by most of the time. So it's okay. So maybe you need to find yourself one of those. But
yeah, I mean, they grow on trees, right? You can just go and find a fantastic player and say, thanks very much. Look, we had it with Anis Mehmeti. We lost him just before we lost Gareth Ainsworth last season. And, those players are worth their weight in gold because, a lot of our defeats have been by the odd goal, and the draws, etc. It shows you the fine margins in this division. And a player like Mendes-Lang, a player like Mehmeti, they can make a massive difference across the season because 3, maybe 4 bits of magic can be an extra 10, 12 points. That's how crazy the division is. That's how tight the margins are. And the amount of scrutiny that goes on in the results is crazy, and the pressure involved in it is really interesting. So yeah, maybe we can find a Mendes-Lang in January, or maybe we've already got one and they're just coming back from injury. We shall see.
We shall see. We shall see. And I mean, you've touched a little bit on the play style there. I'm quite interested to know what the real change is because, I mean, if I was going to describe Gareth Ainsworth's football in a word, it'd be pragmatic. I think it was very, very much that sort of football. It was effective. It wasn't great to watch, I'd say, but it was effective. It worked, and you won games, and it got you out of the division. How would you describe the change to Bloomfield's style of play?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think I've heard Gareth Ainsworth's style called a lot of other things as well. Down the years. Most of our fans quite enjoyed watching it, bizarrely, especially when we were winning. But yeah, I mean, there's no right or wrong way how to play the game. Matt Bloomfield's gone and done all of his badges. He's done the pro license, and he's a very well thought of coach. And in terms of his work rate and his endeavour, I don't think I've seen anyone in any industry that I've been involved in work as hard. But he has his philosophy. He wants to play. This season, it's been a back 3 with wing backs and very much based on the possession. And then, getting the ball forwards and playing the ball in the same style, but in the opposition half. And it's a big sea change from the players that are still there from the previous era, because that's been drummed into them repeatedly and to good effect. But it's a big change. We've seen a big change in terms of playing personnel under Matt Bloomfield. And there's a lot younger players as well. Although if you look at our starting lineup from Saturday, that doesn't really back that up. But there are younger players at our disposal, and as technically gifted as they are, some of the ones who are on loan from Premier League teams are out on loan to learn and sometimes make mistakes. And the club that takes those players on has to accept that. We've seen some great positive signs from our loanees, and we've seen some learning curves as well. So that comes into it too. But here we are in December, and I'd like to think that those loanees that now understand the physical requirements and the playing style requirements of Wycombe Wanderers. So we should be up and running with those now. I mentioned Freddie Potts earlier, I think was really key to the system that Matt Bloomfield wanted to play, and alongside Josh Scowen. It was a real joy to watch them when Wycombe were really doing things in September and those performances in October. We've certainly missed him. And that's the quandary now that Matt Bloomfield has to work around whilst he comes back into fitness pots and see what we can do. But as I said earlier on, it's a squad game just as it is for you guys, and I'm sure there's injuries and suspensions that have hurt you guys too. But we need to look at the cards we've got available for Saturday and find the system, find your Achilles heel, and frustrate you.
Well, we'll see. And it's interesting that you mentioned those midfielders there. I mean, in front of me, I've got written down, I've got Luke Lee here, I've got Josh Scarr, and I've got Freddie Potts all written down, because when you get Wycombe's team on the FOTMOB app, it's depending on the rating, the colour changes. And the only 3 players with green ratings of over 7 average across the season are those 3 players, the 3 central midfielders. I mean, it looks a little bit like the midfield gets you going. The midfield is what carries you, but there may be some weaknesses around the pitch other than that.
Well, Luke Lee, he's been playing for the vast majority of those games that you're referring to with his stats. He's been playing left of a back 3, wow. And then occasionally popping up on left wing back. And then he has pops into midfield as well. He's been a bit of a sort of a Swiss Army penknife for us this season. He's been a fantastic signing on and off the pitch as well. But he's a large amount of his minutes have been as a left-sided centre-back. And then he had that horrific head injury against Stevenage, which led to, I think it was a 26-minute stoppage. And then we lost him for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, of which there were a few games in there, obviously. So, yeah, he's been a big loss in terms of that. But, yeah, Scowen and Potts, I'm not surprised that those stats are being delivered back on their performances. But, yeah, I think it's, I think where we've struggled perhaps is that final third in terms of implementing the style into the business end of the pitch, if you will. Defensively, we've shipped goals at stages this season. That's been tightened up. But equally, it's about the balance. You tighten up at one end, you've got to give you enough license at the other then to go and get the goals. And it's about finding that balance. I don't think we've really found that rhythm yet. I think possibly when we've had the players that had, available that are now injured, unfortunately, if they then come back, we can maybe rediscover it, or maybe we now find the other way with the players we've got at our disposal. We haven't done so yet in the last month. I'm hoping after Saturday's improved performance against Shrewsbury that we strike the formula on Saturday. And we made some big strides last Saturday, despite the loss and despite the frustration of the fans. There were certain indications in the performance that shows that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, Phil, was your defence. Now, I've just got the back 3 from the last game in front of me, and you've got 2, I would say, OAPs in that back line. You've obviously got Joe Jacobson, and I still can't believe he still plays for you at the age of 37. I remember him scored a free kick against Burton about 10 years ago, or something ridiculous like that. So to see him still play at this level is great. But the man that everyone listening will be wanting you to talk about is Richard Keogh, 37 years old. I've seen he's not played a massive amount this season, but he's played a bit. He started the last game. What have you made to him?
He's a great character, Richard Keogh. And I think, first and foremost, he was signed for his sort of leadership, a bit like he was at Ipswich last season. He didn't play a huge amount of football last season, but they had a relatively young defence. And certainly the word from Suffolk was that he was a real leader around the training ground, and the experience and the helping with the younger players. And we signed a lot of younger players as well. And I think it was an astute signing by Matt Bloomfield in terms of the personnel, of the character. I'm presuming he wasn't signed to play week in, week out at the age of 37. Although he's looked after himself, he's physically fit. He's still got those piercing blue eyes. You still know exactly what he's thinking when he's looking at you. And yeah, he's been a really good character in the building. He's a winner. And he's someone that I think the younger defenders like Joe Lowe, Chris Farino, we've got another couple of younger players coming through our development squad in that position as well. All have spoken about the huge amount of help they've had from Richard at the training ground, and also the ones who've played with him on match days as well, and when he's in the match day squad. So I think that part of his role is probably sort of not seen by the stats and other fans from other teams who maybe look back on his previous endeavours with the very long list of clubs that he's played for, which Wycombe was one of them, by the way. He did play for Wycombe at the very start of his career on loan, so it's nice to get him back to add to those appearances. But yeah, he's been a great guy to have around the place, and I'm curious as to what sort of welcome he'll get from you guys on Saturday.
To be honest, I'd hope it'd be a positive one. I think now after everything that's happened, I think we can probably guess that he's maybe not the bad guy that some members of the previous ownership made him out to be. But yeah, I mean, I could attest for that personally with Richard Keogh. I remember I was talking a while ago here. I was probably 14. And I just started coaching for the first time, and I was helping my brother's team coaching, and they were rubbish. They lost every game, and they used to concede loads of set pieces. I remember I came to at the end of the game, and I asked him, I was like, how would you set up against set pieces? And he sat with me for probably 25, 30 minutes. He didn't have to. He could have given me a 5-second answer. I'd have been buzzing with that. But he stayed for 25, 30 minutes. He had pen and paper, and he was making notes and showing where to put players and things like that in different situations. And he didn't have to do that. I was just some random 14-year-old that had come to say hello at the end of the game. And yet he went out of his way to do that for me. So I can imagine on the training ground, he's a really good character to have. And yeah, I hope he gets a good reception. I hope he does. I don't know if he will, but Jack Marriott got a good one, and he was probably just as bad as Keogh's exit was. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that. But I want to ask you about the other end. You've obviously mentioned Sam Vokes is injured. A player that caught my eyes, Dale Taylor. Saw him on loan at Burton last season, looked a decent player, didn't score a massive amount of goals, but he's always working hard. He was always in and around the penalty box. What sort of player has he been?
Yeah, he's clearly got talent there. He's got 5 goals in all competitions for us, which is what he got for Burton. He was only at Burton for the second half of the season, and in what was a team that was probably struggling at the wrong end of the table and playing a style of survival football. So I think it was a decent return for Dale. Very highly thought of at Forest. Sorry, I can't mention them on here, can I?
No, you can't.
Sorry about that. I'll have to edit that out. He's very highly thought of at his parent club, and he has shown really good signs for us. He scored a couple of great goals last week in the Bristol Street Motors Trophy. That's what it's called now, isn't it? And he's clearly got an eye for goal. I think he struggled a little bit in terms of, we've had Brandon Hanlon, who's just had a season-ending injury. So he's played up top with him. He's played up front with Sam Vokes, who's been in and out with injury as well. There's been different changes in and around the system up top. So he's not had a sort of a settled environment in which to play in. But he's clearly somebody who knows where the back of the net is. He's a great lad as well, really good character. And he's a sort of guy that you'd back in and around the penalty area. It'd be interesting to see if Vokes is fit on Saturday. I'd love to see those two together a bit more, because I think, again, talking about the experience that we had with Keogh, with Vokesy as well, and Dale Taylor at the other end of the scale. Dale's already played internationally as well for his country on many occasions, as did Vokesy too. I think the two of them together would be really, really interesting to see if we can get a decent run of games with them together to build up that understanding, because I think he, to me, looks like one of the players that, a bit like another player that we had that also played for Burton, Stuart Bevan. Once he gets running, once he gets that
legend, Stuart.
Yeah, exactly. So you get 3 or 4 goals, and then all of a sudden, a month later, you're in double figures, and the momentum. He was a true momentum striker. He reminds me a bit of Stuart Bevan. So I'm really hoping he catches fire, because he's got that in the locker, definitely. And I think we can hopefully get a really exciting second half of the season out of him.
That's a name I didn't expect to hear tonight,
I like to surprise.
I love it. Yeah, it's that big man, little man partnership as well, isn't it? When you've got the two of them up there together, which has worked so well for so many teams for so many years. But I mean, we've talked about a lot of the team now. We've talked a little bit about the style. But when you look at the strengths and weaknesses of this Wycombe team, I mean, looking at it statistically, you seem to ship a lot of goals. You don't look the most solid at the back. Would you say that that's sort of the most glaring weakness in this Wycombe team?
Yeah, I think if you let a lot of goals in, it makes it quite difficult to win matches.
Good point.
It's quite an obvious thing to say, but maybe worth pointing out. But yeah, I mean, there has been times where we've been very open, and we've scored goals. Like I said earlier on, it's about getting that balance right of the lockout at one end and what it costs you at the other, because again, if you don't let a goal in, then you're guaranteed at least a point. And if you nick something from a set piece, if you are away from home and you do what Shrewsbury did or another few teams have done to us, then you've got the 3. But yeah, it's about finding that sort of rhythm and the balance. And we talked about the amount of transition and change. That is probably what it takes the longest for a new coach to get. I think Paul Warne will probably You know, I agree with that if he listens to this.
Sure
You know,
he
and
does.
that, yeah, and it's well, I hope there's no reason why he shouldn't be. Hi, Warney.
Thanks, mate.
I've always enjoyed his interviews, by the way, and the doc he made on BBC Sounds was excellent when he was at Rotherham. But yeah, I think he's a manager that perhaps Matt Bloomfield will look at and think, okay, he's got in somewhere. He's had his own philosophy. He's had tough times. And I think the noise and the discontent at a club like Derby is probably even harder to deal with because the expectation and the size of the club, the money, the size of the fan base, you've got to ride that discontent, knowing that you're heading in the right direction and having faith in the process. And that's something that Matt Bloomfield has said, you know, about getting the performances and having faith in that process. And it takes time. And we're in that process at the moment, and some of our fan base are equally as frustrated. So, but yeah, that's where we're at with it. And I think it's about getting that balance right. Having a settled back three would be handy, or a back four if we choose to go that way. We haven't had that at either end of the pitch, you know. And like I said to you before we started recording, I don't want to be that person who makes the excuses of injuries, because every club will say it. But you know, we've had an unsettled back three and a strike force, but it's a squad game. We need to get past that and control what we can control and find that balance. And, you know, we haven't had that in the last 3-4 matches, definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got a back three with an average age that rounds up to 35. So, yeah, it's I can imagine that's not the settled one you'd want long term.
We've got younger players in the squad. It'd be interesting to see what we go with on Saturday.
Yeah, it certainly will. And I guess final question on the team is approaching fixtures. You've got kind of similar records home and away, actually, which you don't see very often in this division. Is there any difference in how you approach games home and away, or is it always the same sort of thing?
I think it's tough, you know, with, you know, when we went to Portsmouth, you know, which we would probably put you and Portsmouth in a similar bracket in terms of big clubs, big crowds, big atmosphere, you know, expectation, etc. We went to Pompey and played quite an expansive game, and were unfortunate to lose. Again, you know, a last minute winner. And we really played our part in that game in a footballing sense. You know, it wasn't sort of a park the bus and nick a goal approach. We went to play football, and we did, and we were unfortunate that night. So yeah, I think in a way those games were almost slightly easier, because if you go somewhere against a team of a similar stature who you may cancel each other out and all the other bits, or you're not sort of playing into the hands of the expectation of the other fans, etc. You can kind of go there. I'm not saying it's a free hit. I'm just saying it's more of you've got a bit more of a license to maybe go and express yourself a bit and maybe spring a surprise. And looking at, you know, trends in football, which I like to do. You know, you look at people like Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham, is sort of going against the grain and going, actually, let's go hell for leather here and throw caution to the wind, which is very much against the grain of what's been going on in the last 2 or 3 years. And things tend to filter down. So I'd love us to roll our sleeves up and have a right go at you on Saturday. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm quite rightly nowhere near the training ground at any point during the week. Otherwise, we'd all be in trouble. But yeah, that's what I'd like to see happen on Saturday.
I hope it's open. I hope it's a good game. I really do. I think you get a lot of games in this division. I'm sure you'll have seen the same, where one team will turn up to defend, they'll sit in, and the only time they'll ever go forward is if they concede. You know, they've got no intention. We played Cambridge at home. We drew 0-0 with them. I don't think they left their half for 90 minutes. We just couldn't break them down. It was the most boring game I think I've ever watched. So, yeah, if you can come to us, have an open, exciting game, that's all we want, as long as Derby wins.
I mean, Cambridge did that to us. We did the same result, same thing at Adams Park. And, you know, and I get it from your point of view that it's boring, because, you know, you wanted to see you guys sort of win 4-5-0. But having been, you know, a supporter of a smaller team historically, obviously, I've been in away ends and seen us win 1-0 or draw 0-0 against the odds and not get out of half. And for as boring as you find it, it's great to watch if your team does it and come away with it. It's a different experience. And maybe one day when you do get back to the promised land and you're away at the Etihad and you're doing the same, maybe you'll appreciate it.
Well, we drew 0-0 with Liverpool last season. It was one of the best games of the season, so I do get your point. I don't think we left our half in that one either, to be honest. And one final question, Phil. You know what's coming. I want your score prediction, mate. Go on. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm famously terrible at this, so I really should back you to win in the hope that the reverse psychology works. But I just can't do it. So I'm going to have to say, against all better judgment, against recent form, against what every bookmaker's probably saying in the country, I'm going for an away win.
Wow.
And I'm going to go for 2-1. And I'm going to say it's going to ruin a few coupons this weekend. But I have to say that, Jack. You know that.
You do. You do have to say that. I think you get sacked if
exactly. Yeah.
if you predicted
got a mortgage to pay, mate. Do you know what I
mean? Yeah, I think, to be honest, the thing is, it's classic Derby because we've won 5 in a row. You've lost 4 in a row. The most Derby thing on earth would be if you win and we lose. It's written in the stars. But I'm going to go with the classic cop-out answer of a 2-1 home win. I think it's different when you're away. But when you're at home, the 2-1 home win, I think it'll be similar to last season. You'll get one early on. And then we'll throw caution to the wind, let the handbrake off, and hopefully grab 2 goals towards the end.
We shall see. Well, I mean, what you've just described is why we all love the game so much, because if it was that obvious what was going to happen, people wouldn't go anymore, would they? They go for the thrill, the mystery, and the storylines that will develop. And let's see what the twists and turns develop on Saturday. But it's been a good season for you guys so far. We know we're in for a tough game, but we have to go in with belief and hope. Otherwise, why turn up?
Exactly. Why turn up? And very well said. Very well said. Right. Thank you very much, Phil. It's been a really good episode. I've enjoyed it. It's been one of the better previews. So cheers to that. If you did enjoy, please do leave a like, subscribe if you're on YouTube. We'll get Phil back for the return fixture, hopefully, to celebrate a Derby win and Derby being top of the league, and maybe Wycombe being up there as well. That would be nice. And if you are on Spotify, Apple Pods, make sure to follow, subscribe, like, the stuff by now. I say it every week. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much, Phil, for coming on.
My pleasure. Good luck Saturday.
Wow, thank you. Maybe not the same to you. Nah, best of luck, mate. See you.